He's harmless. Invisible, really. Like a piece of furniture that pays bills. I heard it from 10 feet away. No, I didn't drop the bag. No, I didn't slam the door. I didn't storm into the living room and demand who the hell she thought she was. I just stopped. Right at the hallway corner. She was on speakerphone, laughing. Like she wasn't casually cutting me into little pieces with every syllable. Her voice had that fake lightness she always used when talking to her friend Monique. The one who wore too much perfume and called me Mart, like we were pals. She doesn't know I'm here, I thought. That was the first clear thing in my head. I hadn't planned to come back from Chicago a day early, but the meeting ended ahead of schedule and I figured I'd surprise her. Bring Thai from that place she liked. The one she always said was too far for delivery. I had the damn bag in my hand. Claire's friend laughed back. A loud cackle that bounced off the living room walls. Ugh, men. At least yours pays the bills. To which Claire added, yeah, well, he's just there. Like a fridge humming in the background. You only notice it when it stops working. More laughter. Then something about spa weekend plans and finally doing something fun. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened as my wife dismantled my existence with metaphor. A fridge. Furniture. Harmless. I didn't even get the honor of being disliked. Just dismissed. You want to know what broke me? It wasn't the insult. It was how casually she said it. No malice. No drama. Just boredom. I was background noise in my own life. That's when something inside me did something I didn't know it could do. It shut off. Not like a light switch. More like a breaker tripping quietly in the attic. No sparks. No flames. Just darkness where light used to be. I turned. Walked to the bedroom. Put the Thai food on the dresser. Sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the closed closet doors. And I stayed like that for, I don't know how long. An hour? 3? It felt like time stopped out of pity. It wasn't sadness. Not really. It wasn't even anger. It was recognition. Like seeing your own name on a tombstone and thinking, huh, so that's how it ends. The strange, the things your brain latches onto when it detaches from everything else. My eyes fixated on the corner of the carpet where the dog used to scratch before she got rid of him because his shedding stressed her out. The indentation in the mattress where I always slept. The sound of her heels clicking upstairs as she went to bed. Completely unaware that I had heard everything. I didn't follow. I didn't confront. I didn't cry. I made a list. Not out loud, not on paper. Just in my head. A silent checklist of things I already had in place. The emergency cash in the old shoebox. The duplicate passport I'd ordered when mine, accidentally, got ruined in the washing machine 2 years ago. The P.O. box Claire didn't know about. The second savings account I opened after she mocked me for wanting to budget. And the note I would write. 5 words, no emotion. Don't call. Don't look. That's when I knew. I wasn't leaving her. I was exiting the version of me she'd created. Now, before I continue, I don't usually do this, but apparently more than 97% of people who listen to these stories never hit the subscribe button. If you're one of them and you want more raw, real stories like this, just hit it. It helps our team out more than you know. And we're just getting started. Because this wasn't going to be a story about a man breaking down. It was going to be about a man disappearing, so completely, so precisely, that when she finally noticed I was gone, it would already be too late to find me. I didn't sleep. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. You sleep when you need rest. I didn't need rest. I needed out. The clock read 1:47 a.m. when I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. The drawer that Claire never touched. It had a false bottom, cheap plywood, easy to make. Underneath was the envelope. 600 in small bills, 2 preloaded Visa cards, and a passport that had never been stamped. Not my regular one. This one had been issued when Claire accidentally ran the original through the wash in 2019. It was the same year she stopped calling me by name and started saying things like, "Hey, can you take care of this?" As if I were a dog that handled errands. I took the envelope out, placed it neatly on the bed, and walked to the closet. One duffel. Nondescript. Black. I packed light. Not survivalist, not panicked. Just precise. Jeans, 2 shirts, shaving kit, hoodie. I skipped the watch she gave me last Christmas. The one with the engraving that said, "Forever, C." That inscription meant nothing. It was the 3rd gift she bought with my own money and forgot to wrap. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and stared out the window. The street was dead quiet. Motionless. Like the whole world was holding its breath. Then I sat down at the kitchen counter and picked up a sticky note. I wrote, slowly, in block letters, "Don't call. Don't look." I placed my wedding ring next to it. Not for drama, just to return something that clearly didn't mean the same thing to her as it once did to me. I didn't add a signature. There was no point. She'd know. The last thing I did before leaving was unlock the basement door, go downstairs, and flip the main breaker off. It wasn't spite. It was silence. I wanted her to wake up to a house that felt as hollow as it had made me feel for years. I locked the front door behind me with an absurd gentleness, like I was tucking in a child. That made me laugh a little. First sound I'd made in hours. My car was already gassed up, another habit she once mocked. Who fills their tank the night before? It's so neurotic. I did, because I like to be ready when it's time to go. And now it was time. By 3:20 a.m., I was cruising past exit signs I didn't recognize, heading north. No radio, just the sound of the wind slicing through the open window and the wheels humming like they finally had purpose. I could have gone west, could have turned back. But no, I drove north because it didn't remind me of anything. No family there, no shared memories, just space. The numbness didn't feel like pain, felt like stillness, like being underwater long enough that you forget the weight. She chipped away at me for years, slowly, surgically, mocking my routines, laughing at my kindness, dismissing my presence like I was a misplaced sock she couldn't be bothered to throw out. And I had absorbed it, absorbed all of it, until her words, the ones I wasn't supposed to hear, finally made the decision for me. Not a confrontation, a decision. By sunrise, I passed a sign that read, "Welcome to Fletcher County." Never been there, didn't plan to stay. But I pulled into a diner and ordered black coffee just to feel the heat on my hands. The waitress called me Han. She didn't know me. That was the whole point. I didn't check my phone. I'd left it at home, plugged in on the nightstand like a decoy. She'd find it and assume I was nearby. That was fine. Let her stew in that for a while. The further I drove, the lighter I felt. Not like I was gaining anything, but like I was finally setting something down. A weight I didn't know had been welded to my chest until the moment I walked away from it. There's a specific silence that comes after betrayal. Not the kind that begs for closure, but the kind that simply stops caring. You don't scream into it. You don't cry. You don't plead. You just listen. And for the first time in years, you hear nothing but your own breath. And that's when you know you're free. Claire woke to silence. No coffee brewing. No shower running. No soft click of the bedroom door as I left early to avoid waking her. At first, she probably thought she'd overslept. Maybe I had already gone to work. But when she rolled over and saw the empty side of the bed, perfectly made, something must have pricked at her. It wasn't like me to leave it that tidy. Then the details began to add up. My clothes gone. Every hanger that used to hold my button-downs swayed slightly in the draft from the ceiling fan. My shaving kit wasn't by the sink. My electric toothbrush was missing. Even the beige hoodie she always called my comfort costume. Not crumpled on the chair like usual. Then came the phone. She opened the app she used when she worried about me traveling late. Really, it was her digital leash. But now, location disabled. Last pinged at 3:12 a.m. Then nothing. Dead silence. She texted. A message never showed the delivered stamp. She called. Straight to voicemail. That's when her stomach must have turned. Because for all her petty jabs and little insults, Claire depended on my consistency. Not out of love, not even respect. Out of routine. I was the metronome to her curated chaos. The one who kept the utilities paid, fridge stocked, and nonsense from unraveling into crisis. I was the person who disappeared silently, and that silence now screamed at her. By 9 a.m., she was pacing the house. She checked the driveway. My car was gone. She called the neighbors, at least the ones she hadn't alienated. The Wilkins across the street said they saw me leave early. He waved, Mr. Wilkins said. Didn't look upset or anything. Seemed like a normal Tuesday. Claire didn't go to work that day. Instead, she called my employer. She probably expected them to say, "He's in a meeting," or "Let me check." What she got was worse. "Oh, Mark? He resigned," the HR woman said. "Came in last Friday, cleaned out his desk, returned everything. Very polite. Said he was moving on." I can imagine Claire's frozen expression. Tight jaw, nostrils flaring like they always did when control started slipping through her fingers. She would have thanked them through gritted teeth. Hung up, and sat down hard on the edge of the bed. Same spot I had sat in hours earlier when the switch flipped. The scary part for her wasn't that I was gone. It was that I hadn't left a single thread to pull. That evening, she started doing what Claire always did best, narrative control. She called her friend Monique, the same one from the speakerphone betrayal, and said, "Yeah, he's going through something. Midlife crisis, I think. He's been off lately." Monique lapped it up, of course. She'd been waiting for this moment like a child watching a campfire. Claire posted a story on Instagram, some staged breakfast photo with a caption like, "Self-care Sunday. Even if it's Tuesday, LOL." The background showed a bouquet I hadn't bought. She spun it as best she could. He needed time. He's finding himself. Men get weird in their 40s. But that's the thing about losing control slowly. You don't realize it's gone until the ground beneath you is hollow. That night, she called my parents. They hadn't heard from me either. She probably expected them to panic, to rally behind her, to help track me down. But they didn't. They told her, calmly, that maybe I just needed space. That they'd respect my privacy. That sometimes people don't need to be found. Because here's what Claire never understood. Being quiet isn't the same as being weak. She thought silence meant submission. That restraint was passivity. That just because I didn't fight her tooth and nail for respect, it meant I didn't notice when she peeled it away piece by piece. She thought she was still in control. And that, right there, is why this story didn't end with a bang. Started with one. The moment she realized she didn't just lose me, she never really had me at all. It took about a week for the financial hemorrhage to start. At first, it was subtle. A declined grocery transaction. A bounced Hulu charge. Claire probably brushed it off as a bank glitch. She always assumed the world made mistakes, not her. But when her card was declined at the nail salon on a Friday afternoon, and the receptionist gave her that little smirk that said, "Insufficient funds," the panic began to leak in. She called the bank from the parking lot, half expecting to berate some poor rep into fixing the issue. But the man on the line wasn't frazzled. He was calm, apologetic. "I see here that the joint account was restructured per the signed agreement on file. As of last Thursday, you are no longer listed as an active co-owner." Claire laughed, that high, brittle laugh she used when she didn't understand something and didn't want to look stupid. "Excuse me? That's not possible. This is my joint account with my husband." "Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Elson executed the separation agreement with your prior approval. The signature on file matches the notary timestamp dated August of last year." "August?" she snapped. "What are you talking about?" The man paused. She could hear him hesitate, maybe glance at a manager. "Would you like us to send a scanned copy of the documentation?" "Yes." Immediately, she hung up and sat in her Lexus, staring at her French tips. They were half done, one hand painted, the other bare. A literal metaphor for the state of her life, if she were capable of seeing it that way. By the time she got home, the scan had arrived. She stared at it in disbelief. Her signature. Her initials. The document titled, "Preliminary Marital Financial Adjustment. Non-adversarial." She recognized it. Sort of. It had been slipped into a stack of refinance paperwork last year, when she was busy on the phone and rushing to get to her Pilates class. I told her it was standard. Just some updates in case we ever need to show the bank clear title lines. And she'd nodded, signed, barely looking up. Claire never read the fine print. She just assumed it was someone else's job to handle the details. I was someone else. She texted Monique. "You ever have your card decline in front of a 22-year-old with fake lashes and a god complex?" Monique sent back a laughing emoji. Claire didn't laugh. The mortgage autopay still went through, though. That confused her. She checked the online portal. Yep, the house was still getting paid. But when she tried to pay the electric bill, the portal wouldn't process. Same for water, internet. Even her Apple Card had been suspended for non-payment. Her confusion spiraled into full-fledged panic when the city utility office told her, "The account holder of record changed last month. We'll need written authorization to reinstate access." She sat down on the kitchen floor, shaking. Then she called Miles, their accountant. Or more accurately, my accountant. The man I met in college and brought into our finances because Claire said, "He's boring, but boring is good for taxes." He answered after 2 rings. "Claire, how's it going?" "You tell me," she snapped. "Why can't I access my own money?" Miles went quiet. "Miles?" He cleared his throat. "Mark submitted a formal request for separation of assets in January. You authorized it." "I did what?" You initialed the authorization when we revised your estate planning for that condo sale. I sent you both the paperwork. Her voice cracked for the first time. Why would I sign that? I don't know, Miles said carefully. He told me it was a formality, just in case. Claire didn't respond. She was looking at the ceramic bowl on the counter, the one I bought from that flea market in Asheville, and suddenly she hated it. Hated how calm it looked. Hated how still everything was, even as the ground underneath her feet began to tilt. The panic wasn't just about money. It was the realization that I hadn't just left. I had planned to leave. Months ago. Quietly. Precisely. She had thought this was a disappearance born of emotion. Rage. Heartbreak. Pride. She thought I'd be sleeping in a motel somewhere, waiting to be found. But no, I hadn't disappeared. I had unplugged her life from the wall, circuit by circuit, while she scrolled through sales and spa deals, completely unaware that the house she thought she ruled had been gradually rewired to function without her. And now, she was flicking switches in the dark, wondering why nothing turned back on. In the weeks that followed, Claire learned the hard way that silence doesn't stay private. It echoes. At her office, the whispers started small. A missed happy hour. An awkward pause when someone asked how Mark was doing, and she faked a tight-lipped smile. People noticed, the kind of people who thrive on noticing. The administrative staff, mostly. They were always the first to catch blood in the water. Some thought I'd left her for another woman. That was the easiest theory, and Claire leaned into it. It gave her a script, a role to play, the betrayed, blameless wife. She could tilt her head and sigh dramatically and say things like, "He just needs time to figure himself out." Or, "We're working through a few things." Phrases vague enough to keep people's imaginations spinning without ever giving them anything real. Others whispered darker rumors, that I'd cleaned out our retirement accounts and vanished to Belize, or that she'd gambled away our savings and I'd finally had enough. She was sure those came from Paula in HR, who always hated her for getting promoted first. The reality, of course, was far more boring. The money was intact, just no longer in her orbit. So Claire did what Claire always did, she curated. Posted brunch pics with captions like, "Solo, but never alone kiss mark," and tagged random cafes she hadn't even visited that day. Wore the smile she'd practiced in the mirror for years, the one that said, "In control," even when her hands were shaking behind her back. But the walls were buckling. It started with the car. She came out of a yoga class to find her Lexus gone. At first, she assumed it had been stolen. Called 911 from the parking lot, breathless. But the officer was polite, almost bored, when he explained that the vehicle had been repossessed earlier that afternoon. "Repossession?" she spat. "That car is mine." "No, ma'am," he replied. "The lease is under Elson Industries. It's not registered in your name." She stood there, barefoot on the hot asphalt, keys still dangling uselessly in her hand, trying to understand how her luxury SUV, her status symbol, her mobile safe space, had just evaporated like a hallucination. She Ubered home in silence, sat in the back seat like luggage. The driver had jazz on the radio. Every note felt like mockery. When she got home, she tore through the filing cabinet I kept so obsessively organized. Well, we kept, according to her social media captions. In one drawer, she found the lease agreement, company name on the line, my signature, her initials next to it. It was part of a batch she'd skimmed, barely reading, when we upgraded from the BMW. She started to see a pattern. Documents she'd barely glanced at. Contracts she'd signed while scrolling Instagram. Lines and clauses she never questioned because questioning meant effort, and effort was for other people. The next morning, she tried to post again. Something witty, something aloof. But the comments had changed. No more fire emojis or queen reactions. Now it was, "Hey, are you okay?" and "DM me if you need anything." Even Monique was distant. "People are talking," she said flatly on the phone. "You should probably say something. Get ahead of it." "Get ahead of what?" Monique hesitated. "The story. That he left you. That you're unraveling." "I'm not unraveling," Claire snapped. But she was. And everyone could see it. The facade was crumbling in quiet, public ways. At brunch, she ordered avocado toast and couldn't pay. Claimed her card must have been flagged. At work, she snapped at an intern and then cried in the bathroom 10 minutes later. Her mascara stained her sleeve. She told herself it was allergies. She still hadn't told anyone the truth. That she didn't know where I was. That she hadn't heard a word since the night I left. that every attempt to contact me hit a wall of legal silence and polite distance. Because the truth wasn't just embarrassing. It was terrifying. I hadn't left her for someone else. I hadn't abandoned her out of impulse. I had engineered an exit. I'd vanished not in anger, but with intention. I'd erased myself from the ecosystem of her life like a man untagging himself from photos he never wanted to be in. And now, every attempt she made to restore normalcy only spotlighted the cracks. Each curated post, every fake smile, every carefully filtered selfie was a scream into a void where my absence was louder than any caption. And still, she didn't know the half of it. Not yet, because a vanishing isn't complete until the world notices what's missing. And the world was just starting to ask questions. 2 months in, Claire had developed a routine, if you could call it that. Mornings started late. She no longer had a commute. She'd taken a leave of absence from work after what her boss called some difficult personal events, code for public unraveling. She told people she needed time to heal, but healing implies something was wounded. Claire hadn't admitted there was a wound, only that the weather had changed around her and she hadn't packed the right shoes. The kitchen was still spotless. She kept it that way, hoping that control over countertops might translate to control over something more essential. But the fridge was mostly wine and yogurt. The laundry piled up. Her laptop sat unused on the dining table, its lid slightly open like a mouth about to say something it never would. The doorbell rang at 10:42 a.m. She just sat down with coffee. She flinched, spilled a drop on her thigh, swore. Through the peephole, a courier. No uniform, just slacks and a windbreaker. He didn't look like bad news, which made it worse. The worst news often arrives in polite packaging. "Claire Elson?" he asked. She nodded. He handed her a large white envelope, thick and rigid. Signature required. She scrawled her name on the tablet. He thanked her and left without fanfare. The envelope had no return address. Just her name typed in that formal, deadpan font lawyers love. She opened it slowly, using a letter opener she once bought on a whim because it looked expensive. Inside, 15 pages of legal language. No note, no explanation, just a neatly collated packet titled, Notice of Completed Asset Transfer Elson Trust Reallocation. She skimmed, then read, then reread. Her coffee went cold on the counter. The trust we'd set up years ago, back when she still liked the idea of investing in the future, was no longer what she remembered. According to the documents, I'd amended it 6 months prior. Transferred nearly all residual assets, reserves, dividends, annuities into a private foundation. A registered 501(c)(3), effective immediately upon my resignation and departure. The foundation's mission? Support services for combat veterans and their families. Claire blinked. Veterans? That had been my thing. Quietly, personally. A way to honor my late uncle. I'd once mentioned starting a program, something small, maybe career transition workshops or housing assistance. Claire had rolled her eyes. "Oh, please," she'd said one night after 2 glasses of Pinot. "If you want to feel like a hero, just donate to the Red Cross and move on. No one cares about that stuff anymore." She'd forgotten the conversation. I hadn't. She flipped to the final page. Typed note, not even signed. Just black ink in the middle of the white paper. This is what you never saw. What mattered. No emotion. No accusation. Just a fact delivered like a verdict. The envelope slid from her hands. She sat back in the kitchen chair, breath shallow, throat dry. She wanted to scream. Wanted to throw the documents into the sink. Set them on fire. Scrub them from reality with bleach and denial. But she didn't, because something worse than rage was settling in: shame. Real, undiluted shame. Not because I had outmaneuvered her financially. That was already apparent. But because I had done something meaningful and she'd mocked it. Because while she chased aesthetics and followers and sales on throw pillows, I'd built something that mattered. And I hadn't done it after I left. I'd done it before. While she'd rolled her eyes at my boring weekends and quiet obsessions, I'd been designing a future that didn't include her. One that wouldn't need to recover from her absence. She tried to tell herself it was manipulation. That this was all part of some elaborate guilt trip. But guilt implies intention to harm, and this wasn't harm. It was clarity. I hadn't taken her money. I'd taken the meaning she never bothered to notice. And now she was left with nothing but furniture, filtered memories, and a growing realization that while she was busy controlling the narrative, I had already rewritten the ending. The message came in on a Thursday night. One of those nights when Claire had nothing to do but pretend she wasn't checking my old accounts or Googling my name in incognito mode. She'd started doing that a lot lately, searching for any digital breadcrumb, podcast mention, a foundation press release, a tagged photo, anything to prove I still existed in some capacity that was traceable, familiar, and ideally regretful. She didn't expect the text from Elena, an acquaintance more than a friend. They'd once bonded over overpriced candles at a charity auction. Claire hadn't spoken to her since. Elena saw this, thought you might want to. Attached, a Vimeo link. Claire hesitated before clicking. She had learned to brace herself for impact lately, the way you do when walking past a mirror and not knowing if it will reflect the you that exists or the you that's unraveling. She tapped it. The video buffered. The screen lit up with soft gallery lighting and a sparse audience, maybe 40 people seated in a semicircle around a small stage. On the stage, me, wearing a gray sweater she didn't recognize, beard trimmed, hair shorter than she remembered. I looked leaner, healthier, not polished, not flashy, but solid, centered, like someone who had finally exhaled something he'd been holding in for years. A woman introduced me, Mark Elson, founder of the Elson Initiative for Veteran Renewal. Tonight, he's sharing a bit about personal transformation and how building something with meaning helped him after what he calls an invisible unraveling. Claire sat straight up. I took the mic. No notes, no script. I smiled slightly. Not the smile Claire used to call polite and bland. This one was different. It had presence. I used to think disappearing meant failure, I said. That being unseen meant I wasn't enough. But the truth is, sometimes it's the environment, not the person, that fails. You can't grow in a room that's already decided who you are. Scattered nods in the audience. Someone clapped. Leaving wasn't an escape, I continued. It was the first real act of being visible. Not to anyone else. To myself. Claire blinked. The screen blurred for a second, not because of the resolution. I kept speaking, calm and assured. I told them about the foundation, the transitional housing units that were finally opening, the veterans we'd helped get job training, mental health support, community. She barely heard that part. All she could focus on was the way I stood. Not hunched, not apologizing with my shoulders, not searching the room like I was waiting for permission to finish a sentence. I wasn't broken. I was reborn. She watched the video 3 more times that night, rewound it, froze the frame when I laughed at a question from the audience, zoomed in on my eyes. They didn't look tired anymore. She didn't cry. Claire had built up a callus against tears. But there was a hollowness now, a gnawing ache that had no name. It wasn't just that I had moved on. It was that I had become someone without her. For years, she'd assumed her presence was the polish. That I was just a raw, uncut version of a man she sculpted into something tolerable. She'd bragged to friends that she'd refined me, taught me taste, taught me how to speak in a way people listened to. But there I was, speaking, and people weren't just listening. They were respecting. She scrolled through the comments. Someone called me genuine. Another said, "We need more people like him." A woman named Laurel left a row of clapping emojis. Claire Googled the foundation's name, found a website. Clean one, professional, built with intention. She checked the board members' recognizable names. There was a photo of me at a ribbon-cutting ceremony next to a young vet in uniform. She closed the laptop, got up, walked to the window. It was dark out, but the kind of dark that makes you feel like the rest of the world is glowing somewhere you're not. For the first time, it truly hit her. Not only had she been left, she'd been excluded. I hadn't just walked away. I'd elevated. Without bitterness, without theatrics, without the need to prove anything to her. I didn't want her back. I didn't need her back. And that, more than anything she'd seen or heard in the last 2 months, is what finally shook her. She didn't matter to the man I'd become. She debated turning around twice on the way there. Even with the GPS droning directions in her ear, Claire's hands gripped the wheel like they were trying to keep her from veering off course, either into traffic or into the past. The last time she'd seen Jacob Elson was at their wedding. He hadn't smiled once. He hadn't danced. Mark had introduced him awkwardly. His older brother. Complicated history. Claire hadn't cared. He wasn't polished, wasn't charming. She dismissed him instantly. The kind of man who smelled like firewood and didn't make eye contact. Too rough, too rural. She remembered him leaving early, without saying goodbye. She liked that. fewer photos to crop. Now she needed him. The gravel driveway crackled under the tires as she pulled up to the cabin. Not picturesque. No rustic charm. Just wood and weather and stillness. A single porch light flickered against the dusk. She sat in the car for 30 seconds before stepping out, heels digging into the gravel like they didn't belong there. They didn't. The front door opened before she could knock. Jacob looked older but not weaker. His eyes were sharper than she remembered. He didn't smile, just nodded once and stepped aside. Claire. She walked in. No hug, no small talk, just the smell of black coffee and cedar. He motioned toward the kitchen table and poured her a mug from a steel pot already sitting there. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't either, she muttered, taking the coffee. Even though her stomach was in knots, they sat. Silence settled. He's okay, Jacob said finally. She nodded too quickly. I figured. I saw something online. Jacob raised an eyebrow. The gallery? She nodded again. He looked different. Jacob studied her for a moment. Not with curiosity, with calculation, like someone examining a crack in a dam and wondering how long until it bursts. He told me, Jacob said slowly, that one day he'd leave, not out of spite, not to punish you, just to stop being erased. Claire didn't respond. She didn't know how. Her mouth opened, closed. She hated how warm her face felt. He used to say, Jacob continued, I feel like I'm the background of my own life, like she's the lead actress, and I'm just a guy who holds the shopping bags. Claire stiffened. I didn't mean to make him feel that way. Jacob gave a short, humorless laugh. Claire, the thing about erasing people is that it doesn't matter if you meant to. It still happens. She took a long sip of coffee, hoping the bitterness would give her something to hold on to. Didn't. Then Jacob stood, walked over to a drawer, pulled out a small black USB drive sealed inside a clear zip bag. He gave me this before he left, Jacob said, returning to the table. Said to hand it to you if you ever showed up asking questions. Claire stared at it. What's on it? She asked quietly. Jacob didn't answer right away. He placed it on the table, slid it across with 2 fingers like dealing a card in a game she'd already lost. He said it would help you understand. Claire's throat tightened. Understand what? Jacob's face didn't soften. Why he stopped talking. Why he stopped trying. Why he left. She reached for the USB but paused, fingers hovering. Does it? She began, then stopped. Does it what? Jacob asked. She swallowed hard. Does it show that he still cared? Jacob leaned back in his chair. For the first time, his gaze softened, but not kindly. More like pity mixed with exhaustion. It shows that he tried. For years. Quietly. Without applause. And that eventually, he realized trying wasn't the same as being seen. The room felt suddenly colder. Claire took the USB, stood up. Thank you. Jacob didn't rise. I didn't do it for you. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves swirled across the gravel. She got into the car, set the drive on the passenger seat, and sat for a moment with the engine running, unsure if she wanted answers, or just wanted to pretend the conversation never happened. She looked down at the little black object sitting beside her. She had come for clarity, but she was starting to realize, clarity doesn't always comfort. Sometimes it just cuts. Claire waited until she got home to plug in the USB. The drive sat on her desk for 3 hours, untouched, while she circled her house like an animal that had forgotten its own cage. The lights stayed off. She poured wine she didn't drink, stared at her reflection in the window and tried to convince herself she didn't care what it contained. But of course she did. When she finally slid it into the laptop, the folder popped open instantly. Hundreds of files, short video clips, dated and time-stamped, organized by month and year. The earliest one nearly 5 years ago. The latest, labeled simply last night. She hesitated, the cursor trembling over the first file. Then she clicked. The screen showed their old living room. The same one she'd renovated twice because neutral colors were depressing. The camera was angled from the bookshelf, discreet, motion-activated. Mark sat on the couch, quiet, typing something on his laptop. Off-screen, her voice filled the room. Can you not do that here? You're killing the vibe. God, you look like an unpaid intern on Zoom. He looked up, forced a small smile. Just finishing the audit report. I didn't ask for your schedule, Mark. I asked you to stop ruining the mood. The clip ended. She opened another. Dinner with friends. Laughter, wine glasses clinking. Her voice again, cheerful, performative. Mark's idea of fun is balancing spreadsheets. He's like a robot with a mortgage. Laughter followed, hers the loudest. Mark smiled, politely. She saw it now, that small flinch, almost imperceptible, as the camera caught his jaw tighten for half a second before he reached for his glass. Another clip. Another comment. Another dismissal. She clicked faster now. One after another. The sound of her own voice echoing back at her like a courtroom playback. Mocking his shirts. Interrupting him mid-sentence. Joking to friends that he reads instruction manuals for pleasure. Every video a mirror turned against her. The clips blurred together. The wineglass trembled in her hand. Then she found one labeled simply, December. The video opened to the kitchen. He was alone, pouring coffee. The date stamp matched the week before he left. His face looked hollow, detached, like a man rehearsing something he'd already decided to do. He spoke quietly to no one in particular. Maybe to the camera. Maybe to himself. She doesn't see it. Maybe she can't. I used to think silence was surrender. Turns out, it's just space to plan. He exhaled, almost smiling. When I leave, I won't take revenge. I'll take peace. She'll wake up to silence. And I won't be here to witness her confusion. That will be my peace. He looked straight into the camera. Just for a moment. Long enough that it felt like he could see her sitting there now, trembling in the glow of the laptop screen. Then he reached forward and turned the camera off. The room was quiet. Claire's breath caught, shallow and uneven. She replayed the last line over and over until it started sounding like static. That will be my peace. Her peace had been noise. His was absence. She closed the laptop but could still hear his voice. Steady, calm, stripped of everything she used to control. The truth was unbearable not because it condemned her, but because it revealed how long he had lived in that quiet decision. She thought he'd walked out in a moment of impulse. Now she knew it was a finale rehearsed over years of invisibility. The wineglass slipped from her hand, shattered against the hardwood. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there, surrounded by pieces, replaying her own laughter from the recordings echoing faintly in her head. Every word she had ever said had become the evidence he needed to disappear. And now, even in this silence he'd left behind, she realized, he was still the only one being heard. The lake house looked exactly the same. That was the first betrayal. Claire had driven the full 4 hours in near silence. Music turned off halfway through when she couldn't stop cycling through the lyrics for meaning. She kept expecting to turn a corner and see the place overrun. Dusty, abandoned, water-damaged, neglected like she felt. But it stood there, polished wood gleaming, lawn perfectly trimmed, shutters repainted. The wind chimes still hung by the porch, only now they rang a different tune. Less wind, more warning. She unlocked the door with the old key, half expecting it not to work. It did. Inside, the house was spotless, cleaner than she remembered it ever being. Every surface gleamed, every drawer was organized. No clutter, no chaos, no trace of her. Except one. On the coffee table in the sunroom, the room she once dismissed as too rustic for guests, there was a single photograph, a printout from their early days. The two of them at the lake, both tan and grinning, heads tilted toward each other. His side was cut cleanly out. Not torn. Not burned. Just removed. Like he'd been excised surgically, the way you remove a tumor that had once been part of the body but no longer served a purpose. Beside it was a note. Handwritten. Simple. I didn't need revenge. Just distance. No greeting. No signature. No instructions. Claire stood there for a long time, gripping the back of the worn leather chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She stared at the photo, at the empty space where his face had once been, then looked out the wide lake-facing window, expecting, somehow, to see him. But there was only water. Still. Endless. Indifferent. She moved through the house like a ghost tracing its old haunts. The bedroom still had crisp sheets. The nightstand, empty. The closet had hangers but not one item of clothing. Even the drawer where she used to stash makeup she swore she didn't wear anymore had been scrubbed clean. He'd erased her right back. In the kitchen, she found a single mug in the cabinet, plain, black, no logo. It wasn't one of theirs. None of them were. Every item they'd once picked out together. The artisanal plates, the gold-trimmed glasses, the wine o'clock sign gone. She pulled open drawers, searching for some fragment that proved she still had a footprint here. Nothing. Not even dust. Claire sat down on the back deck as the sun began to dip behind the trees. The same spot they used to sit with coffee in the mornings, her scrolling through her phone while he watched the water like it was speaking to him in a language only he understood. She looked out now and the view was the same, but it felt like she'd never been part of it. Her reflection in the glass door behind her was faint. It didn't feel like her anymore. It felt like someone who had occupied this life briefly, loudly, and without listening. She read the note again, this time aloud. I didn't need revenge. Just distance. It landed heavier the second time. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was a declaration. Quiet, final truth. He hadn't wanted to win. He just wanted to leave. And he had. Without shouting. Without a scene. Without giving her the dignity of a final performance. There was nothing left for her to destroy. Nothing she could call her own. Not even his anger. That had always been the thing she relied on. That no matter how far she pushed, he'd flinch. He'd react. He'd care. But silence? That was irreversible. And here, in this pristine house built for a future that never came, Claire finally understood. He hadn't walked out on her. He'd walked back to himself. She sat there until the stars came out, not blinking, not speaking, just staring at the lake, at the place where his reflection used to be.